In this next unit, we're going to be taking a look at how to create a plate and give it the illusion of reflectance, much like you can see here with the orange being reflected in the interior and the top surfaces of this silver plate. You can also see that it's picking up areas of the resting surface and a little bit of the blue wall in the background. So first of all, we're going to learn how to create a plate. I just got a demo file here. The assignment has required you to put 2 fruits into your composition for still life. I'm just going to set my workspace up, reset it for Essentials Classic. I'm just going to alternate my toolbox to a 2-column format, open up the tools that I'm going to need for this. I'm going to need my color panel, collapse the others. I will use my appearance panel. I will use my layers panel, collapse the others, and I'll probably need my pen tool suite, possibly the pencil tool suite, and that should be good enough for now. If I look at the layers panel and I just make these visible, you'll notice I have an apple and an orange that I created in earlier segments, and what is required of me now is to create the plate. Then we'll composite the 2 fruits inside that plate and then start working on building credible looking reflections. Ours is going to be a silver plate. Silver typically has a spectrum in the grays. It runs from white for spectral highlights to black, and with a gray in between, kind of representing the average silver color. Color is going to come into it in terms of reflectance. Those light rays, which are bouncing off objects in the environment, are going to land somewhere on that plate and bounce back to the viewer's eye. We will perceive color in these reflections, and we're going to represent them on some of the faces of that plate, much like the example we just showed. First of all, a plate is essentially an ellipse. I'm just going to create a new layer and double click that, and I'll name it plate. Hit return. So now with that plate layer, I will use an ellipse. I'll just hold down the Option key to draw from center. I want to give it a kind of forced perspective. Imagine this is a circle. We're just seeing it from down low on the horizon. This is kind of the plate as seen from above, but we want to kind of match the perspective of our composition here. I think that's a sufficient amount of perspective right there. Let me just default color this, no color for the stroke. And for the fill, I'm just going to use a gray. For that, I'm going to need my sliders. I'm just going to drag them all to a position of equality, and that's going to give them a value of gray. I'm going to make a copy of this, Command or Control C on a PC, and then Command or Control F. Command F or Control F pastes the copy right in front of any object that you have currently selected. I'm just going to scale this back, scale it this way, so that this really is representative of the front section of the plate, the lip. I'm just going to give that a slightly different coloring. Now if I hold down the Shift key when I move my color sliders, they all move in unison. And so I can scale that back and make that a little bit darker. Almost like we have a hollow inside of the plate. If I'm going to make this like a bowl so that there's an interior aspect to it, I need to give it some depth. As we drop from the lip down inside the bowl, this is representative more or less of the interior of that plate. The exterior would probably come down and along here, much like this. I'm just going to copy this for now, Command C or Control C. Now I can select this and I can say Command or Control B. That means paste the other copy behind this lighter gray thing that I had selected. So I'm just going to move this so you can actually see it. You can see it kind of dropping down there. I'm going to give that just a slightly darker gray, just so visually we can differentiate the components. Then what I'm going to use is the Direct Selection tool, just to select that point. And if I hold the Shift key down, I can go over and select that point, and then I can move them up the way. So I'm just going to hold the Shift key down, and move those points up to there. So that's essentially what I've done. Imagine that I'm crafting the exterior surface of that bowl, and it's coming down, meeting up right at the lip here and coming down to here. I could even extend this down the way if I wanted to, just to give the appearance of that bowl getting deeper. And I'm holding the Shift key down just to constrain movement in one direction vertically. Now I could, instead of having it so convex, I could expand. It's difficult to see here with the blue, so I'm just going to change the color of my plate layer. If I double click on that, I can change this to, let's say, orange. So now the selection outlines are in a different color. I could select here, and I'm just going to zoom out, Command or Control 0, and I can grab this, and I'll hold the Shift key down just to extend this out so that the handle, this is the round handle on the direction line, more or less lines up with that point. And I'll do the same over here. Again, I hold down the Shift key just to keep the movement in one direction horizontally. And I just kind of eyeballed it. So it's sort of stretched out that bowl a little bit more. Let me drag this down just a little bit more. Again, hold the Shift key down. And that to me looks like a pretty decent representation of a bowl. That bowl has a bottom to it, and right now it's a little bit on the flat side here. So this is where we begin crafting shadow detail. We could do this using a combination of things. For starters, I might want to select this and make a copy of it, Command C or Control C. And then I'm going to paste that in front of this, Command F. And I'm going to fill it in black because I'm going to use this as a shadow. I'm just going to make it darker. So it's a rich black containing cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And now if I just move it down, you'll see it start to appear. That's the shadow detail right there. Now the problem with it is it's extending beyond the edge of the bowl's exterior. So I need a way of clipping that off. Command 0 to zoom out. First, what I want to do though is using the appearance panel, I want to make sure, because this is shadow detail, that I multiply it, and I'm going to drop it in at about 35%. That's usually where you want to be with your shadow detail. Now you can see the shadow detail below that, which is kind of nice. So what I need to have happen is to have a copy of this, Command C, and I need to paste it in front of this, Command F. Now when I'm using the Command key, you substitute the Control key on a PC. I need to select this object and the shadow. So it's going to be this lighter gray object on top of the shadow, which is going to be used as the clipping path. I have those two things selected, and now if I say Object, Clipping Mask, Make, the top object masks out the shadow object. I could select the shadow object with my direct selection tool, or if I want to use my layers panel, I could select it. You'll notice that it created a clipping group. I'm just going to go to Panel Options and choose Large Thumbnails so it's easier for us to see. And this was the clipping group that we just created. There was the mask element that matched the curvature of the bottom of the bowl, and then this was the shadow. So with the shadow selected, I can also use the appearance panel here to add a Gaussian blur. So blur, Gaussian blur. And I can throw a little bit of a blur radius in there just to make that shadow slightly dissipated. So it looks now like this lip is casting a shadow from light that's coming from above. What's important is that you choose a light direction and you stick with it. Be consistent in the way that you apply light and shadow to your fruit elements as well as the plate. Now what I notice here is that the lip of the plate has no depth. So I need to create that lip. And I'm going to create that lip by cannibalizing existing shapes. Command or Control 0 to zoom out. And just to show you how I'm going to do that, I'll just use the selection tool, use the Option key just to create a copy of that. And then I'm going to create another copy of it, Option to make a copy, Shift key just to keep that copy in vertical alignment. What I hope to do here is select these two objects. Let me lock down that background layer. Let me call it background for starters, and it's now locked down. This allows me to use my selection tool. Select those two circles, eye for eyedropper. I'm just making this darker just so we can differentiate the two. So I use my selection tool, just drag a little marquee to capture portions of both. And then I'm going to use my shape builder tool with the Option key to delete the top and the bottom portions. The only thing problematic with this is that we have this curving in the way, and that doesn't quite make sense entirely. So if I were to move this down, you'll notice that it just doesn't quite fit the bill. We have this little area unaccounted for, so we need to sort that out. I'm just going to do Command Z. I'll zoom in nice and tight, and I'm going to issue Command or Control Y. So we go from preview mode to outline mode, so we can see the actual structure. And I can click on this so I can see the location of points. And then I'm going to use a rectangle, which will begin here. Command 0. I can now select all of those elements, and I can use the shape builder, drag across these to fuse them together, just like that. Again, on the other side, I'll do the same thing. Drag them across, and it's all fused together. So let's see the difference now. Command 0 or Control 0 to zoom out. Command or Control Y so that we can see that element. And let's move that element down into position. You'll notice it's currently sitting in front there. We want that to move behind. So a nice little shortcut is holding down the Command or Control key and using the left bracket. That's just to the right of the letter P. If we come over there, you can see it just needs a little bit more aligned to the right hand side. And again, I'm just trying to get these things to line up nicely. Over to the other side. And it's looking pretty good there. It's now all perfectly aligned. We now are going to turn our attention to the interior of the plate. We're going to use a combination of masking and shadow detail. And again, if you think of light coming in here, we're going to see some shadow detail in this region right here. But to really kind of sculpt the bottom of the plate, I'm just going to create a copy of this. Easiest way is to hold the Option key down. And it's always good to keep a few spare parts in reserve. So I'm going to grab another one of those, and essentially what I want to do is have part of this work as the shadow. And so just want to have these things overlap to a degree. Select both of those items, and we will use the Shape Builder tool to remove those things that we don't need. So with the Option key held down, I can remove this. I just want to give that a slightly darker edge to it. And if we move that down, you can see that that looks as if that's the bottom of our dish. Much in the same way, I could create shadow for this. And so for that, I'm going to Option key, hold the Shift key down so it moves up straight. I'm going to use a masking technique for this. I'll do that in conjunction with using the blob brush tool. I'm going to use the blob brush tool with a black fill. I'm going to hold down the Command key, click down on the background. It doesn't select the blue because I have the background locked. Now my blob brush tool, if I double click it, I can set its size, set an angle for it, and a width if need be. Then paint in whatever stroke color I happen to have. Like I said, I'm going to use black. I could paint in what I felt was going to be the shadow. Just going to do that now. And of course that shadow would get thicker as we transitioned towards this side of the plate. And it would dissipate as we went this way if our lighting's coming from the top right. Now I'm just going to change the ordering of this. Cut it, Command X or Control X, select this, and then say Command or Control B. And this allows me now to hold the Shift key down, select this object, and I'm going to use this as a clipping mask as well. Object, clipping mask, make. So we're only seeing this portion of the stroke. This in turn, I'm going to select this blob, and with the Appearance panel, again, I can add in a Gaussian blur. I can also make sure that my opacity blend mode is set to multiply, and again I can throw that in at about 35%. So now I can take that complex of clipping mask and that stroke that I just created, and I can drop that into position as well. Knowing that it's fully masked, I can make adjustments. I can move this up here and take this and move it to here and alter the curvature. And if need be, I could add more blur on that, and therefore these areas would be cast in a degree of darkness. I can play with the existing Gaussian blur, increase or decrease that, depending on what sort of lighting I want to generate. So I've made it a lot more subtle by adding more blur here, as you can see. So we have the base of the plate, we have the edges of the plate. This is your basic plate construction.